The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Monday, July 18, 2016. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't think it would be an overstatement to say that the world, it might be melodramatic. Let me preface it by saying it may be melodramatic, but man, it feels like the damn world is on fire, right? Like the whole world. It's been crazy this weekend. So much to talk about, from the coup in Turkey to the fallout from the coup to Baton Rouge. Like, we can't go a week without something horrible happening in the United States by itself, but also in the international community. It's been very, very testing and trying. So I want to talk about that. I briefly want to talk about Freddie Gray again, but unfortunately, it's nothing really new to say other than another day, another trial, and another non-conviction in the case for Freddie Gray. And so we'll talk about that. And also, I ultimately want to talk about this notion that Black Lives Matter is a hate group. You can join the conversation, 857-600-0518. I'll take calls in the second half of the show because there's just so much going on. Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Mike Pence is, of course, Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. A lot on. If you follow Mike Pence at all, you already know the kind of political fun that we could have just discussing the things that he actually stands for. Probably more important, what he stands against. But I don't know. It's just been a crazy weekend, man. It's been crazy. Listen, I want to first thank Anoa Changa. She always has my back, sis. Thank you so much. I don't have an applause track, and it's all my fault. I just haven't brought one in yet. But thank you so much for covering me on Thursday night. I needed to get my head together we had a loss in our family, and that on top of everything else just kind of took me over the top on Friday. So I wasn't able to be here on Thursday, rather. So thank you, Anoa, for stepping in, and to the entire Progressive Army team for stepping in and making it possible for me to just get some. And listen, if I don't say anything else, I want to say this at the top of the show: take care of yourselves out there. It is a rough, sad, brutal world, and those of us who delve into the political commentary and our political advocacy and just fighting for what you believe in, it could be even more abusive and damaging. So I'm telling you, just taking that Thursday night off and spending more time with my family actually rejuvenated me a little. But of course, little did we know we had this weekend coming up in front of us. So let's talk about the tragedy in Baton Rouge. 3 officers shot dead, ambush styled by a black separatist. And sometimes we put a lot of emphasis on finding out who and what the shooter was, but I think it's incumbent upon us to take a moment and consider who was lost. Now, I'm doing this because I choose to do this. And I shouldn't even have to say this, but I want to say this. For me, it is just as tragic. I am incapable of celebrating the death of damn near anybody, to be quite honest with you. I might have a condition where I'm just not capable of being happy about someone being killed, even my enemy, and these police officers were not our enemies. They may have been, not these police officers. I don't know anything about these police officers, but, we may have things that we need to protest. Yes, not may. We absolutely have things that we still need to protest. We still need to be in the streets. We still need to bring political change. We still need to bring reform to every police department across the United States. However, we got to chill the hell out. And when I say we, let me be specific, not we. People who would use violence and kill people for their cause, in my opinion, are not worthy of the cause. Let me say that again. You come here for my opinion, so I'm going to give you what I firmly believe. Baton Rouge was a tragedy. Dallas was a tragedy. And anyone who celebrates that, in my opinion, you're not worthy of the movement. I'm not capable of dismissing the loss of life for anyone. I wasn't able to do it for Antonin Scalia, eventually I got into it and was like, ding dong, the witch is dead eventually. But, at least for the first 24 hours, I was legitimately, I took a respite on political commentary as much as I could, because we're talking about Antonin Scalia. I took a pause because I wanted to respect the fact that somebody died. Most people will say that's ridiculous. That's fine. That could be ridiculous for you. But I just wanted to place it in context. I am completely opposed to this type of violence. 100%. I am 100% for violence if it is necessary to save my life, the life of my family, the life of my friends, or the life of somebody I'm witnessing in danger. I will have no qualms whatsoever in that type of scenario to utilize violence. And I shouldn't have to give this long caveat about this, but I want to make it clear, not just for the people who want to blame all of Black Lives Matter, because, hey, I am Black Lives Matter. I am Black Lives Matter. Right. I not only want to make it clear for them, but I also have to make it clear for that subset of people who would probably agree with me on 90% of the issues. And it's that 10% of the issues where we part ways, and we part ways hard. And I'm not telling you that you have to feel like this is a tragedy, but I'm telling you, to me, it breaks my heart to think that these three officers, Montrell Jackson, Brad Garafola, and Matthew Gerald, they are all fathers, husbands. They now leave families of children who have to grow up without their fathers. And to me, I'm not capable of qualifying my sadness. I grieve for them just as much as I grieved for Alton Sterling's 15-year-old son who cried out that I want my daddy. You know what? These three officers' children are crying out the same thing. These are real people. These are not political pawns. And I'm saying that to both sides of the argument, because a lot of people would use these three officers as a political prop to silence Black Lives Matter. So I just want you to think about that in context. So over the weekend, on yesterday, a man from Missouri ambushed and killed three officers, wounding three others. One is fighting for his life. The shooter has been identified as actually the young man. His birthday was on yesterday. This Missouri man, his name, and it actually escapes me at this point. Long. I know his last name was Long. His first name, what the hell, man? I don't have his first name. Eugene. There he. No, his middle name was Eugene. Davin Eugene Long. You see what happens in my brain? Like, I had to piece his name together in reverse. Long Eugene Davin. So what? We don't even have to really know his name. But Davin Eugene Long, from Missouri, drove from Missouri to Baton Rouge But now we don't have all of the details as far as this 911 call that was actually involved. There's still a question mark over, and I'm sure we'll know that probably before the end of this week, over whether he actually placed the 911 call, someone in conjunction with them placed the 911 call, or if it was a bystander who placed the 911 call. But there was a 911 call that was placed that ultimately led these officers to the scene. And upon them arriving on the scene, he opened up fire and wounded 6, killing 3. Davin Long is just like the shooter from Dallas, former part of the armed services. The Dallas shooting was he was a member of the Army. Davin Long was actually a Marine who spent time overseas, came back and created this online persona called Cosmos, Convos with Cosmos. He was a podcaster. He was a YouTuber. He has a lot of videos out there, unfortunately, which leaves almost like a manifesto that people who might think similarly could go to and consume his material. I actually found out about Convos with Cosmo, I would say probably an hour before most everyone else, but because I move with intentional slowness to confirm my sources, I don't try to be the first one out with it. But an hour before the world the masses found out, I went to his YouTube channel and saw that his primary video had like 100 views, right? Nobody was going to watch that. But now, his video probably is in the hundreds of thousands of views, all of them, because everyone wants to know who this murderer was. Gavin, I said Davin, but his name is Gavin Eugene Long. And so he is the murderer. He is the person who killed these officers. He was they are alleging that he is a part of a black separatist movement. And this black separatist movement, they actually brought up the name of the Sovereign Citizens Movement. Now, the Sovereign Citizens Movement is actually has firm roots in racism and white supremacy, but there are some parallels with black separatist movements in the aspect that they don't view the federal government as legitimate. If they view any legitimacy, they view the legitimacy from the local office, the local sheriff's office. But in this case, he not only killed police department members from the city, he also killed a police officer. So there was a lot of speculation yesterday on whether or not Gavin was a part of a white separatist movement. Once we found out that he was black, then the conclusion was that he was a part of a black separatist movement. However, in researching the Sovereign Citizens Movement, which has been a violent movement in the past, and even though it has some racist, not some, its background is fully and thoroughly racist, there are still black members of the Sovereign Citizens Movement. So it was not entirely implausible that Gavin Eugene Young was a part of the Sovereign Citizens Movement. But however, so all of that is still being paced together. So long story, tragic story, just another week. In many ways, this is a copycat. I really haven't heard a lot of people say that word in conjunction with the shooting, but he is clearly too many parallels with the shooting in Dallas. Young black man in his 20s, service in the armed forces, one in the Army, one in the Marines, and came back and disillusioned with the system and took up their arms and their former training and went out and killed. Listen, I've already said plenty of commentary about the type of damage one person can do, even up against an entire department of good guys with guns. Nobody cares. Nothing is going to change with the ability to get access to these types of weapons, because that's just not what we do in America. We don't actually change things for the better. We just dredge along with the same problems that are going to come back and bite us in the ass next week, right? We've already given commentary on the fact that these guys were in the military and that the military changes people in a very significant way. And for a person to be fighting overseas for whatever they feel in their minds is the justification for fighting overseas, and to come back to the United States and feel as though they have great injustices in the United States, on top of the rewiring that any person from the military would tell you happens when they are exposed to war and death and that type of violence. This is the formula for another tragedy. On top of that, add on the copycat factor, because you know what, you cannot, he was actually, Gavin Long was actually in Dallas just last week. One of his videos, he was broadcasting from a hotel where he went to Dallas. In that video, he stated that he did not go to Dallas because of the shooting, that he was there already, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is this, is that if we just continue to minimize all of these mass shootings, all of these problems, whatever the reason for them, they all have some common factors that we, across the board, from Orlando to the shooting in Michigan, where the bailiffs were, they all have commonalities that we continuously ignore because we would rather politicize it for our political ends. And we do it on both sides. And ultimately nothing happens. Nothing happens. And so we allow that formula that allows for this type of massacre to happen to continue to be in place, and for this to happen over and over and over again. So I'm not going to give any more commentary on the fact that these types of weapons allow maniacs to cause this much damage. People who are willing to die for something are able to inflict in so much carnage very easily because they can get access to these guns. But I'm not going to give any commentary on that because we're not going to do anything about it in America. I'm not going to give any more commentary on the way we treat our veterans, the lack of access to care, the lack of access to treatment for evaluation, for PTSD, for just the psychological evaluation. I heard someone say we need to do a psychological evaluation before we send them over and when we bring them back, because you never know what this war has done to people. Then bringing them back into an environment where, yes, there is, and listen, people are going to want to tell you, well, if you just don't talk about it, then somebody like Gavin Long would not have gone. No, it's not as though we're incapable of viewing the systemic injustices for ourselves and making and drawing our own conclusions based on what we see. It's not like Gavin Long needed someone to coin Black Lives Matter for him to be aware of the amount of injustice that's in his community, right? It's not as though he would be completely oblivious to all of the police shootings if Black Lives Matter never existed. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. 857-600-0518. It's been a long weekend, man. So much is going on. So many sad events. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Is it me?
Yep, you're live on the air. What's your name?
Okay. My name is Linda, and the reason I'm calling is I saw two screenshots of the Daily Show's Jessica Williams comparing, I don't know if you've seen it, comparing the situation of Hillary Clinton and Trump to going to a restaurant where they said the friends outvoted me and I now decide to go into an alley and eat dog crap. The reason I'm saying, the reason is these kind of things it's a very false metaphor, because the true metaphor would be is if you knew that restaurant your friends outvoted you on is filled with rodents and all kinds. It's failing health inspections. It's maybe trying to push the other better, restaurant out. And you get what I'm saying. So the thing is, when 2 weeks before the New York primary, Saturday Night Live did something similar where they know they make jokes on Clinton's corruption, but then when they make their commentary, they made a commentary on Susan Sarandon saying, "Why don't you jump off a cliff for what she said?" And in my opinion, anyone who knows this, why people are against Clinton, there's no reason to say that Trump supporters are any better or worse than Clinton supporters. And I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm going to vote third party, but this kind of leads into their trying to vilify third party voters as well. So whenever people, like if you're going to say Clinton, okay, if you were a big, even if you weren't, if you're going to say Clinton is the lesser of two evils, and or if you were going on and on about the corruption, and now you're saying vote for Clinton, and you vilify the people who are going to Trump, you have no leg to stand on, because in my opinion, a vote for Clinton and a vote for Trump, one is not, well, you may think one is better than the other. If you think a vote for Clinton is better than a vote for Trump, that's fine, but the people who say a vote for Trump is better than vote for Clinton, you can't vilify them, because they're, in my opinion, they're the same. And so I just wanted to say that because I've been seeing that far too often. And actually your tweet too, I'm sorry, when you said a black Trump supporter, why do you support white supremacy? Depending on the reasons he may be supporting Trump, I can ask some well-known, not just someone who doesn't know anything, but people who go out there, the pundits, the surrogates of Clinton, why do you support corruption? That if you're going to ask that as the first question to a Trump supporter, then you can also ask, why do you support corruption as the first question to a Clinton supporter. So
see, I was gonna let you have your comment, and because appreciate the call, and you were on hold, so I let you stay there, and I was just gonna let you have the comment because you were on hold so long, but then you had to go and bring me in it. So now I actually have to address it. So let's address that. So it doesn't change the fact that, whether or not you feel vilified because of Jessica Williams. And listen, thanks for the call. I got a lot of, apparently you stirred up something. There's a lot of callers calling in now. So it doesn't change the fact that, the statement that Jessica Williams made has some validity to it. Like I'm not a fan of these false comparisons, right? And we'll get back to the other stories in a second. I'm not a fan of false comparisons or some of these silly memes and whatnot. I'm not. But to be sure, now that you brought me in it, if you are a black person supporting Trump, you may not like white supremacy. You may not be a black white supremacist, but you're sure as shit standing next to white supremacists this week at the Republican National Convention. I mean, there's no way around it. And so I want to see people, I need them to explain their thinking and their rationale and give me your priorities. Maybe your priority is not something that you could stand next to a white supremacist and support. Well, help me understand that. So that's the reason for my tweet. But sure as shit, you are standing next to white supremacists. Donald Trump himself may not be a grand master of the Ku Klux Klan, but he has the support of all the grand masters of the Ku Klux Klan, just to be sure. Right. So I want to make people sure. So it's not a matter of vilifying them. I mean, hell, we can, if you want to just vilify people, then we can go down the line. Right. But the fact of the matter is, I want to know how a gay person can vote for Trump. How, for Republicans in general, right? I want to know how a poor person can vote for them. I want to know, you can ask the same question about Clinton, but that doesn't negate my ability to ask the question about Trump, right? How can poor people vote for Clinton? Well, shit, if you have the choice between Clinton and Trump and all you're concerned about is your economics, then you might very well just vote for Clinton, right? And to be sure, I'm positive there may be some Klansmen who support Hillary Clinton, but you sure as hell know they are not going to be out loud and proud, signifying that they are part of white nationalist movements here to support this man who is invigorating the white nationalist movement. I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't. You can have 1,000 things that you hate about Hillary Clinton, but one thing I tell you is she is not going to have. Now, she might get some money from them. I don't know. She get money from plenty of places that I disagree with. But I will tell you this in terms of who you actually have to stand next to at these conventions and these rallies, you are quite literally standing next to white nationalists, white separatists, white supremacist organizations, neo-Nazi organizations who are proud to support Donald Trump. So yes, there is a reckoning that must be had to any black supporter of Donald Trump. I just need to know how you can justify standing next to them and how that does not make you second guess who you support. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Bryce.
Bryce, what's going on, man? What's on your mind?
Well, the RNC is a complete shit show, and a lot of progressive media, they're covering it and just destroying it right now. It's hilarious. But obviously what took place last weekend is obviously...
And you know what's bad? I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but it wasn't even last weekend. It was yesterday. You know, and look at how quick. Look at how quick. And it's not just you, Bryce. I noticed in the entire American psyche, we've moved on. You know, we're still commenting on it, but that's not the lead story of the day. The lead story of the day is the RNC. But go ahead. What's on your mind?
But let's see. I'm sorry. What happened yesterday? Sadly, you know, what happened with the police officers is very sad, and, you know, I'm not one of these guys that's, you know, praising it like some people have done. And, you know, listen, I understand what's going on. I understand what's been happening with us and the police shootings and not getting justice. Of course, Freddie Gray today. And I know us as black people, we're at a boiling point and we're ready to snap. But as I said before, and as you talked about last week, that, you know, this whole going to war thing is just not going to work. You know, like I said, we're not united enough, and, you know, it's just, we're not where we need to be to even think about even trying that.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying that we're supposed to stand there and take it, but it's like, you know, I think we need to try other options. I know some people might say, well, the other options are not working. Well, do we try other options?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I don't agree. I think we, thanks for the call, Bryce. I think a lot of times we like to use that as an excuse. Well, we've tried everything else. No, you didn't. Because most of the people were saying we tried everything else. Your ass didn't even go and vote for the local mayor. Right? Don't tell me you tried anything else if you didn't vote in the last mayoral election. I don't give a damn about the presidential election right now. If you want to change your city and you're tired of police brutality and you didn't vote in the last mayoral election, shut up. You didn't try everything else. Apparently, they done turned on something in me tonight. We might get lit tonight. All right. Caller, you're live on the air. But Bryce, I agree with you. But for people who are saying they tried everything else, they didn't even vote in their local election, so they can be quiet. Talking about a damn revolution, a violent revolution, and your ass won't even get up to go vote for mayor, who's directly responsible for choosing the police commissioner, who's directly responsible for setting the culture of the local police that who are brutalizing you. But you want to skip that and go to shooting somebody. Please sit your ignorant behind down, because you are extremely counterproductive and ignorant. This is my show, so you're live on the air, caller. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hi, Ben. This is Vita from San Leandro.
How you doing?
First, I want to condolence to your loss and your family.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you. I missed you on the while you were gone, because one of the things that I didn't would like for you to dig a little deeper in is President Obama did that town hall meeting.
Yep.
It was just horrible to me, and it didn't address the issues about the police reform.
Yep.
Because every time that you hear the talking points from all the different stations that they do, they never dig down and talk about the first thing that needs to be done is the accountability part. Because even if you have cameras and that part, that's not going to do anything. They need to deal with the contracts and that part. And also the federal government can also, they already have a law on the books where they're supposed to, it's mandated that they're supposed to collect the data already. But then when you look at it, even if they collect the data, police departments can screw their data because they can put different categories and so forth and change stuff. But when I go back to look at, I sent you an email about Dr. Khalil Muhammad has a new book about how data lies, and it talks about how the criminology, how it started and how they keep perpetuating it, and even, and how they believe when they see African Americans, that we're just automatically criminalized.
Absolutely.
But it's a pattern that they do. And I think we need to, if you could just educate people more in your atmosphere, because you have a great reach to more people to understand how data is used for good and bad, and whatever you want the outcome to come, even with the political polling and stuff that they use. Because for 55 years, at least 30 years of my life, I've never got a phone call, even when I had a landline or even the mobile thing and the polls that they use. And then also we need to start holding the Democratic part of the DNC about the voting, and not so much the suppression that the Republicans done in the 31 states, but the own Democratic Party has not put any funding into fighting against the laws in each state. That then we go into the general election, then they wonder why the voting is low. But see, like when Hillary did, like my California primary vote that I did, I called in, I used my stuff for my ballot. They cannot tell me whether or not my vote was counted still today in California. That's kind of hard to accept to vote. And they cannot tell you, Alameda County cannot tell me whether or not my vote has even been counted.
And to be honest with you, you said, thank you for that call, because you actually bringing me back to some points that I wanted to make. Some important things that you're saying. It's, we have to hold the Democratic Party accountable. And I think that's something that anyone who's ever watched me for any amount of time, that's something I've been harping on for a very long time. Thanks for the call. So we do have to hold them accountable. However, I think some people mistake holding, here it is. This is what it is. I think people on both sides of the left-leaning spectrum in America feel as though if you take the time to address something other than what they deem important, then you are a distraction. And this is what I mean by that. I've always said hold the Democratic Party accountable. But at the same time, I am not required to ignore the idiocy that I see from the right. I can't. It's impossible for me to ignore the idiocy and the bigotry that I see on the right, because if I'm going to take the time to call it out on the left, you sure as hell know I'm going to call it out on the right. But for some reason, a lot of progressives, and particularly Bernie Sanders supporters, feel that, oh, you're talking about Trump now. What did you think? Did you think I was going to actually not say something about Donald Trump? Me going against Donald Trump does not mean that I support Hillary Clinton, because if I was in a red state, I would have a purple state, a swing state, I would have a day of reckoning, because I guess, because of my personal convictions, whether or not I would vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm in Massachusetts, so I can vote my conscience. You could read between the lines, right? So I can vote for what I think is the right person for me to vote for, right? But me pointing out the problems with Donald Trump does not mean that I'm supporting Hillary Clinton. And me saying something critiquing Hillary Clinton doesn't mean that I support Donald Trump. If you get tired of people telling you that, oh, you're attacking Hillary Clinton, therefore you're supporting Donald Trump, then you should understand when I tell you guys, please chill the hell out. Me pointing out the truth about Donald Trump is not supporting Hillary Clinton. Because as I have always said, we have to hold the Democratic Party accountable for what they've done just as much as we hold any other party accountable for what they did. 857-600-0518. Man, I am letting the callers drive the conversation. It's the first time for everything. Letting the callers drive the conversation tonight. What do you want to talk about? This is the free-for-all. Let's go for it. 857-600-0518. Well, while I have a split second, let's talk about some international news, because I know if I don't do it right now, it's just not going to happen. I want to talk about, and actually I didn't do, let me do something here. I want to add his picture here. The coup in Turkey. Friday night, it was, it was just unbelievable sights and sounds from Turkey, showing the coup as it happened, showing the backlash from the citizens, from the people, pushing back against the coup, and then subsequently the end of the coup right before our eyes. Technology has taken us to a place where we can see these things unfiltered, unscripted by the mainstream media, and this is what we saw over the weekend. So on Friday night, President Erdogan and factions in the Turkish military, the key players here in this coup, the Turkish military, who view themselves as the protectors of the secular state in Turkey. There was an attempted coup to remove President Erdogan in Istanbul and Ankara. The coup failed by the dawn of Saturday morning. It's interesting to note that this is, I believe, the fourth coup attempt in the past 100 years. So in a way, this is very consistent with what military coup, for that matter. This is very consistent with what happens in Turkey. So the military sees itself as the safeguard to secularism in Turkey, and the president is seen as an Islamist. Many members of the president's political opposition actually denounce the coup. In other words, they have vehement opposition to what the president stands for, the policies that he would enact, yet they could not side with the coup, which at the end of the result of what happened is actually a very smart decision for them, for their personal political lives, as well as their life in general. As a result, the interior minister has fired 9,000 police officers in the country. They have over 6,000 soldiers who have been arrested. 3,000 judges have been suspended. They have grounded U.S. military planes at the U.S. Air Base. These are planes that have been used to bomb ISIS. So the planes that are bombing ISIS from Turkey, they have been grounded. And the government is considering the reinstatement of the death penalty to deal with the insurrection. So this is a crackdown of all crackdowns. Now, in many ways, I guess the question would be, well, what do you expect? And I think most people would say we would not expect this far-reaching of a crackdown. So this is, despite what a lot of people may try to speculate in terms of the real impetus behind who's really behind the coup, the ultimate result is an extension in the power of President Erdogan and his ability to really to reconstruct the government to be something that he now approves of. So I'm sure he's going to have the leeway politically to do many things domestically, but on the international front, there are a lot of people who are looking down on his actions. Clearly, Secretary of State John Kerry has expressed that these actions would actually threaten Turkey's membership in NATO. We'll just have to see exactly if that statement, of course, is a significant statement from Secretary of State, but will it really have teeth with this large scale of a crackdown and the potential of reinstating the death penalty? State Department spokesman said that it's too soon to say if the clampdown by the Erdogan government could jeopardize Turkey's membership. But again, it has been alluded to by John Kerry that it could. So we'll see these developments this is still a moving story. There are a lot of people who have been arrested who potentially could face the death penalty if they're able to reinstate it. So I think at that point, we would really see what the international community, particularly NATO, will have to say about the actions of Turkey. All right, 857-600-0518. I knew if I didn't talk about it there, we would never get to it. So over the weekend, also, in the midst of all of the serious issues that are going on, we also have the buffoonery that is the Republican convention and the selection of Mike Pence to be the vice presidential pick, and the interview that Donald Trump had yesterday with 60 Minutes and Mike Pence. If you watch the interview, there's no way you could come out of watching that video, that interview, and not realize that, man, we're screwed, man. I hate to say it like that, but we're screwed not because so much of Donald Trump, but I want you to think about this. It's not Donald Trump per se. It's the millions of people who can look at this video and just lie to themselves, like Mike Pence said, and say, this is the type of president that we need. Like, who watched 60 Minutes and in their sane mind would say that Donald Trump is the type of president America needs? Well, apparently about half of the voting electorate, well, not quite, whatever percentage he got of the Republican base. But, there's enough people who hate Hillary Clinton with an extreme hatred that, the polls are suggesting it's going to be a closer race than what anyone would expect with a clown like Donald Trump. But the point is this: there are people who legitimately, millions of people who legitimately look at Donald Trump and view him as the type of president that America needs. That should scare you more than Donald Trump himself. Forget about Donald Trump, but think about the mental gymnastics. And I'm going to be nice as I can about this. Think about the mental gymnastics that goes into a person justifying their support of a person who knows nothing about any of the serious issues of the day. A person who is incapable of controlling his mouth to address issues in a sensitive and a deliberative way, which is a requirement of the presidency of the United States, a president of the United States. I mean, even with what happened in Baton Rouge, President Obama rightfully called for cooler heads to prevail, particularly from people in power that have the ability to sway their following. That's a reasonable thing to request. And enter Donald Trump shortly thereafter with this insane tweet that basically furthers the division in the United States. So the problem is not Trump. The problem is all of the people who just can fix their mouths to think that he is a reasonable candidate to represent their values. It is completely insane. And this is what Mike Pence did yesterday, despite all of the things that he said and voted on that was contrary to what Donald Trump said. He was willing to bite his tongue and just nod his head like a good yes man. Like, yeah, I want this position so badly that, yes, I'll say that anything Donald Trump, he's a type, no matter what ignorant thing Donald Trump has said, Mike Pence just nodded his head and said, yes, this is the type of president that we need. And Mike Pence, 4 years as Indiana governor, conservative, primarily a social conservative, some fiscal conservatism, voted for the Iraq war despite Donald Trump attacking Hillary Clinton vehemently on the Iraq war, which is the right thing to do, right? The Iraq war was a crazy vote, but Donald Trump has now neutralized. I wonder if people realize that Donald Trump has effectively neutralized that criticism of Hillary Clinton. And I'm sitting back wondering yesterday, was there anyone he can pick from the Republican caucus that did not vote for the war, the Iraq war, because anyone he picked that was in office, I believe, voted for the Iraq war, which means the only, I don't know, maybe there's some other valid criticisms, but the most salient criticism of Hillary Clinton is her brashness rather, in the international community. He has now neutralized that argument by picking Mike Pence. So how is he going to get in a debate and say, well, Hillary, you voted for the Iraq war? Then she's just going to turn around and say, yeah, but you just picked a VP who voted for it. Now what? I mean, even the choice is an ignorant choice, politically speaking, strategically speaking. You know, it was just a dumb choice. He bumbled through the entire selection process. First he wanted them, then he didn't, then he took them because it was too late to turn around. So, you know, in the midst of all this, you have the millions of people who can look at him and say, this is the type of president that we need. So the convention is going on this week. I'm not sure what portion of it I'll watch. I don't know if I'll watch any of it, but I'm sure I will, because it's going to be great political fodder, right, for us to give commentary on. There's the preacher. I can't think of his name. Don't feel like Googling it. I was going to say the short, bald head guy, but I'm almost balding, so I better not say that. But the short preacher who has been all up on Donald Trump for the longest time, he's getting a primetime spot to speak. And, you know, that's what he wanted, right? That's why he was up on, I'm using that colloquial intentionally. That's why he was up on Donald Trump so much. And I still, the black preacher, Donald Trump still polls at like 1% across the nation in the African-American community. So I'm sure this preacher might give him a nice little boost up to like 1.2% if he's lucky. I doubt even that much, maybe 1.002% more realistically. But I still want to know, and I don't want to just know this from black people who support Donald Trump because of the white supremacy around it. I want to know it from regular conservatives, like conservatives. You could be black conservative and you support him for economic reasons. I want to know why you could support someone like Donald Trump, even if you're a woman conservative. How is it that you could support Donald? How do you rationalize it? I'm fascinated by the thought process that you have to go through to justify supporting someone like Donald Trump. Or is it party commitment? Are you so committed to the Republican Party that you are willing to look at someone who had this insane interview on 60 Minutes that actually made Sarah Palin look reasonable and informed? Not really, I'm lying. He wasn't that horrible. He was close, though. He was damn near close. But I want to understand the rationale and the thinking. And I promise you, I'll be nice. So if you want to come on the show, I'll give you a chance this week and we'll discuss it. But I want to know. I want to know from every demographic in the Republican Party how you can support Trump. And why is this not really just the end of this iteration of the GOP and allow Hillary Clinton to become the new face of the GOP? All right, 857-600-0518. I want to take a moment here as we get ready to shut down the show. We're almost at the tail end. I want to thank my patrons. We honestly couldn't do it without you. Everything that you see is a result of your donations. So thank you so very much. I want to thank Grace L., who pledged. Thank you so much for your generous donation and your pledge. Max G., who pledged over the weekend. Thank you so much for your donation and your pledge. And Stefania J., thank you so much for your donation and your pledge. We can't do it without you. If you like what we do, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and sign up to become a patron. Everybody watching can pledge $1. Like, $1 is a bottle of water and these lights are hot. So just consider yourself buying me a bottle of water once a month to support the show. Also, want to take a pause. I did thank Anoa Changa, but I want to thank David Grossman, the entire Progressive Army team. I want to thank Max. I want to thank Mary. I want to thank all the people who are actually pulling this together. Thank you guys for what you do. We couldn't do this without you. And every time you see us, we're going to be a little bit better and a little bit stronger because of all the people who are helping out. All right. Last but not least on my list, let's talk about this. Yep. I think that's enough. Maybe. I'm thinking. Okay, yeah, we'll cut it here. This is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about this idea that Black Lives Matter is a hate group. For me to talk about this effectively, I actually have to go back a little bit. I want to take you. Let's talk about something that happened hundreds of years ago. So, 1517. Stick with me. 1517. Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on the doors of the All Saints Church in Germany. Now, inside of this thesis was a direct criticism of the power structure that was the Catholic Church. And in many ways, Martin Luther was fighting against the religious oppression of the Catholic Church. One of the most powerful things that he wrote was not in the document itself, but in the fact that he translated the Bible into being a common language Bible. And it gave the common person the ability to read the Bible for themselves, as well as using this new permission that the 95 Theses granted them, the ability to interpret the Bible for themselves. And this empowered an entire several generations of people to begin to read and interpret the Bible for themselves. This was heresy. This was complete heresy in terms of the Catholic Church, because there was so much control that they had over the ability. And in this day, this was information, right? They had control over the dissemination and the interpretation of information. And Martin Luther came along and said, no, this is not how we're going to do it. The way we're going to do it is everyone gets the chance to read this information for themselves. Everyone gets a chance to interpret this information for themselves. As a result of that freedom, there ensued a series of rebellions from the common man. Mass violence erupted. Violence that led to the deaths of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, ultimately leading to a war that divided. It was directly connected to this revelation on information and actually this liberalization of information. It directly led to extreme violence that he was then called upon to condemn. From two different groups, the Catholic Church looked at him and wanted him to renounce his teachings, right? And use this violence as a justification to say, this is why the common person cannot get their hands on this type of information. This is why the common person needs the powers that be to control the information and to interpret the information for them. And not only the Catholic Church, but the people who are the direct beneficiaries of the 95 Theses, the German aristocracy, they also wanted him to renounce this violence that came from the common man that ultimately was connected to this liberation that Martin Luther gave them. All right, fast forward 499 years. Fast forward to another Martin Luther King, who wasn't fighting against a religious oppression so much as racial oppression and political and economic oppression. And in the midst of Martin Luther King leading this new revolution, King was also looked at to be responsible for every little bit of violence and large violence that ensued from people who probably had a different view of the world anyway, because they would rather go with the violent means versus Dr. King's nonviolent means. But that didn't matter. It didn't matter that Dr. King stated that I am nonviolent and I am for nonviolence and I stand against violence. It didn't matter. People still wanted to hold him accountable for all of the violence that ensued during the unrest in the 60s. And if you take a look at some of the hate mail that Dr. King got, it is eerily similar to some of the same things that we see today. In this letter that was addressed to him in the 60s, it highlighted saying that I'm doing what I think every responsible citizen of the nation should do, protesting to you because of your incitement of the Negroes to conduct threatening the peace and safety of the nation, which, whether it is fully responsible, it is with any group which can be connected, essentially saying that you are, whether directly responsible, you are still responsible for all of the violent unrest that ensued because you dare to get out there and say that we must change this system. Again, the people who benefit from power, as well as the people in power, trying to use civil unrest as a way of silencing a revolution. We saw it with the Reformation, with Martin Luther. We see it now. We saw it in the 60s with Dr. King and the civil rights movement, and even some more of the letters, actually, before I move too quickly. Dr. King, another letter, they use some of the same exact tactics that they use today. How can you be a minister, one letter says, and have such hatred in your heart for the white race and the nation in general? Dr. King was viewed as a leader of a hate group. Dr. King was viewed as a person that, because he stepped out and said that we must fight against this systemic oppression and this racism and segregation and the economic oppression, then because I have the nerve to say that these things are important, now the rest of the world and the powers that be and those who benefit from power are saying to me that I hate the country. But it doesn't stop there. They use the same exact MO that they use today. History doesn't repeat itself. It actually rhymes. Here's a letter addressed on July 11, 1966. The most important part is highlighted on your screen. Los Angeles, Des Moines, Omaha, Chicago, and Cleveland are in Mississippi, the Deep South. What about the violence by blacks in these cities? So in other words, you're responsible for all the violence. Saying that we should stop oppressing you means that you hate America. And then what about the black on black crime? This is literally the same terminology that is being used today. And so starting off, this is a tactic that has been used historically. This is a tactic that has always been employed by people who are directly in power and those who benefit from that power. They want to use the violent unrest as a means of silencing legitimate revolution, legitimate change. And so fast forward to today, Black Lives Matter, even though it has expressly stated that it is a peaceful movement, they still use the same exact tactics that they've done historically to say that if there's any violence whatsoever, because you have the nerve to step out and stand up and stand against the power structure, you are therefore responsible for it. Even if not directly, you are indirectly responsible for it. Therefore, you are a hate group. And if you're not a hate group, then surely you just hate America. You hate white people and you hate America, because saying Black Lives Matter automatically means that you don't think that all lives matter. And so we're going to say all lives matter and blue lives matter just to remind you that black lives don't matter because you hate white people. This is the logic that they use. And then if not that, then they want to use, black on black crime. What about that? Focus on black crime. Well, let's talk about the black on black crime that I've talked about ad nauseum. First of all, we do fight against black on black crime. There are organizations in every community that are fighting against the violence in our communities, yet and still black on black crime is not far more significant rather than white on white crime. Black on black crime, blacks kill black people at about 93% of rate. White on white crime, white murders are committed by white people 84% of the time. And the numbers are very consistent across demographics, which speaks to the fact, as I said last week, that this is a result of our communities being extremely segregated. If you are going to be killed, you are more likely to be killed by somebody you know. But I'm not here to argue about that. I'm here to highlight the fact that they've done it throughout history. They will always use any means possible to silence dissent, to silence people who are trying to change the world, silence people who are trying to break the power structure, the people that control the reins of power, the people who control the flow of information, the people who have the ability to do the oppression. They will use everything they possibly can to silence. They will even use dead cops as a political pawn. Because if blue lives really matter to them, then they would have said something last week when in St. Joseph, Michigan, Larry Gordon, a white man, shot and killed 2 bailiffs. But nothing, I mean, did you even know this guy's name? Did you even know this guy's name? Do we know his background? Do we know his history? No. You know why? Because Larry Gordon being a white man is not politically expedient. They cannot use him as a tool against black people, against Black Lives Matter. Therefore, there's nothing to talk about. Put it away. If blue lives actually matter to them, then they would be talking about this issue with Larry Gordon just as much as they would about Dallas and Baton Rouge. But blue lives only matter to them to the extent that they can use them to silence Black Lives Matter. It has always been about stopping people who are seeking systemic change. Then what about white people? White people are killed more. More white people are killed than black people by police officers. Yeah, if you look at the raw numbers, but proportionately, black people, or black men in particular, 6% of the population and 40% of the people who are killed unarmed by the police officers. But let's talk about if all lives really mattered. We already know blue lives don't really matter to them. It's just a political ploy. But if all lives really mattered, why the hell aren't they out there protesting on behalf of Dylan Noble, a white man who was just killed by police officers in between the same time Alton Sterling and Philip Castile was killed, Philandro Castile was killed? That's because they don't matter. They have no problem. All lives don't matter to them. They have absolutely no problem allowing and standing by and watching this type of oppression be executed by police officers, even if it hurts their own community. But let anybody stand up against it, then all of a sudden these lives matter. No, white lives only matter to white people to the people who use this tactic, to the extent that they can be used to silence Black Lives Matter. And I tell you what, if you're so concerned about all of the white people who are killed by police officers, then instead of using them as a prop to silence us, let me know when you start your protest and we'll be there to stand in solidarity. Because you know why? We know that if they're going to kill somebody in your neighborhood, they're just as likely to kill somebody, if not more likely, to kill somebody in the black neighborhood. But again, it has been the same exact story throughout history. It's not about valid arguments. It's not about valid critiques. It's about using simple techniques to silence people who want a revolution, people who want to change the power structure, people who want to no longer be oppressed. So it's not about Black lives. It's not about blue lives mattering. It's not about all lives mattering. It's about whatever they can do to silence Black Lives Matter. So is Black Lives Matter a hate group? No more than Dr. King was a hate group. Is Black Lives Matter a hate group? No more than Martin Luther was responsible for all of the violence that ensued after he liberalized information. And the information source at that time happened to be a Bible. But people got a hold of information and made up their minds for themselves and decided we want to do something different. Last note, and I'm out of here. I've been thinking about, can we actually survive this new age of the democratization of the media, liberalization of information, the ability to access information at will, not only factual information, but biased information that confirms our biases? Are we able to actually survive this? Right? Are we in the same position as the peasants in the Reformation who are finally able to get information on their own terms, interpret that information on their own terms, and challenge the power structure based on their interpretation? Are we able to survive that? Because as you see, we are in a hyperpolarized society where everyone has information that confirms their own biases. Everyone has information that supports their own positions. And yet and still, we're not able to find common ground and resolutions, but we're in a divided society even more so. Can we survive? I mean, we talked about it before the show. I hope it doesn't require what it took after we had that liberalization of information and the Reformation. But I mean, 100 and some odd years, a war. You know, have we matured enough as a society to be able to grapple with this onslaught of information and to move forward without having to take 12 steps back? Because now we have so much information that we're not able to handle and we have to fight each other. I don't know the answer to that. The only thing I can tell you is that time, you know, we're on this side of that flashpoint in world history where what was considered to be something horribly detrimental at the time and led to mass violence and revolutions at the time is such an important part of world history that now we have to look and say we're at a new flashpoint where we all have this type of access to any information that we need, and the interpretation is completely up to us, even if it simply confirms what we always believe. Can we handle that as a society? I don't know. I just hope it doesn't take as long as it took after the Reformation. Folks, we'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.